So in this video, I want to discuss about a bit of a topic about DanMachi and the future of the story, because one of the things that I do see quite a lot throughout the DanMachi story is a lot of people saying that the story is going to end after 1 year of timeline in Bell's journey. So from the beginning of volume 1 until 1 year has passed in the actual story itself, this story will conclude. And people have said this based on the author's words. Apparently he said this in an interview. And so I did a little bit of digging, asked around, tried as much as possible, because with one of those things is when you ask people for proof, they generally just always tell you to go to Google, and Google is the most inaccurate place you can go to when it comes to finding things. I know back in, maybe 5 or so years ago, people used to use Google as like, oh, just check Google, it has the answer. But Google has become more of a place where people just use keywords. It's like YouTube clickbait, basically. That's what Google has turned into. It's just like YouTube clickbait video titles. It's just a whole game of what keywords can you shove in there. It doesn't matter how accurate the information is. So when people say go to Google, I instantly roll my eyes. So I wanted to talk about 2 parts of that argument of the story ending after 1 year. And that is, the first part is discussing about, I've asked a couple of people that have said that they've listened to the interview, and some of them have told me that the translation of how the fans have interpreted it has kind of warped, and it's not quite what he has said. And it kind of reminds me of similar situations like Classroom of the Elite. Overlord is definitely one that was a bit of a prevalent issue when it was during the German convention. The author went to an event and someone asked them the question of, hey, would you like another season of the anime? And he's like, yeah, I'd love another season. And then instantly everyone took them would liking to see another season as instant confirmation. Like, just because the author wants something doesn't mean they're going to get it, because it doesn't just come down to their words alone. It's profitability, studios, publishers, licensing, that kind of stuff. And so that got misconstrued. Even though I tried to ask people that spoke German, they said, oh, no, he did confirm it. And then I was just like, nope, double checking. And I found out that it wasn't translated properly. It was misunderstood and the context was twisted, and then it went all over Twitter and people believed it. People made videos, and yeah, it was a bit of a mess. The point that I'm getting at is that misinterpretations happen quite a lot when an author says one thing and then a complete opposite will happen. It's kind of like a game that I used to play in primary school that the teacher used to make us play, where we would be told something from the teacher and we would have to repeat it to the person on our right until it went around in a circle, and then the person on our left would repeat what we said, and it was always something different to what we initially said to the person on the right. And the point of that is to demonstrate that as things go from one person to the next, it changes and molds into something completely different. And so what I'm simply trying to say there is that, sure, people might be saying the author said X, but you need to be skeptical of that, because over time things do get warped and changed, and it may not be exactly what has been claimed. And it's no fault of the individual telling you. They've probably been told something that other person has heard, and it's just best to sometimes be a little bit skeptical, even including stuff that I say. Everyone should be a little bit skeptical and try to dig a little bit deeper into the truth. The next point is that even if hypothetically the author said this and he said, yes, it's going to be 1 year journey and that's it, even if that was the case, that was many years ago, and a lot of things do change. Authors do say one thing and change their mind many years later. I think we need to stop holding people to this standard where they say something like 5-10 years ago and being like, hey, they said this, so we have to hold them to that exact word. Unless the author comes out tomorrow and says, yes, I'm going to stick to this, then okay, I would be like, okay, well, yes, that's your valid point. Then that means that's what they're intending to stick by. But if it's been like 3, 4, 5, 6 and beyond years, it's kind of like one of those where it's like, things can change. They could have changed their vision. And it's very clear, and this is the point that I'm getting to, is that the story has a long way to go in the sense of this long epic journey. And it's not just about Belle's journey, it's also about Ai's as well, because of the low-key familiar side story, the Sword Princess side story. That has a lot of really interesting hooks still to go. They're going to be diving deeper and deeper and deeper into the dungeon, so there's some major stuff going on in there. There's also the big major quest. There's also talk that the next volume is going to be based on the education district, so I've been told from people that have done translations for the new volume, which has been released in Japan. So the story still has a good chunk to go. And it's not just those two, there's also other side stories as well. We're going to get backstories. We just got a bunch of backstory stuff for particular elf that is a major focus in season 4. And so there is still a lot to come when it comes to the story, not just from the game, the mobile game, because all of that is canon, except like all the event stuff that I don't believe that's canon, but the major story is canon. And then the light novels itself, which are the main source material, but the games itself also are a main source material as well, but the anime is based on the light novels. So at least that's how I think it works. Could be wrong. See, question me. So I definitely think there is a lot more of the story to go, and I think as the author has kind of worked out that vision over time, it has molded and changed and grown into something a bit more long length. That's also not to say that Bell completes the major quest that has been hinted at from the very beginning and something else doesn't come up after that. I mean, he's still got a rematch with a particular individual that he had won in the previous part of the story. He won the first round, lost the second round. There's meant to be a third round with a particular big boy himself in the dungeon training up. So there's also that subplot as well, and there's also other plots that are going to happen and approach and disappear. Those hiding in the shadows, the gods and the goddesses playing their own individual games. We've got a lot of side story stuff to do with Freya, and I'm sure there's going to be more stuff coming up as well. I mean, Hermes is a major key character, and what's to say Belle's non-biological grandfather sort of reappears. What's going to happen there? If he does reappear, he may not, you never know. There's many different things that could happen in the story that may or may not happen. I'm just kind of throwing random speculative. Some may happen, may not happen, so that way you don't know what is and is not a spoiler unless you've read the light novel. So I'm trying to do it in a way so it doesn't spoil the story. So some might be a little bit way off in the distance, some of it may be a little bit more spot on. You have to work it out for yourself. The point that I'm getting at is that there still seems to be a lot more of the story. Where I think the story will go is more speculative. I think we're definitely going to get an interesting journey for Belle outside of the dungeon, and then you're going to get a lot more training, and it's going to be constant building up. But it's not just Belle's journey of training, it's also going to be other characters, part of his familiar, those outside of his familiar, part of the Loki familiar, some of other familiar members that are now deeply intertwined in Belle's journey and the Loki familiar journey. You're going to see a lot of characters moving forward, growing and developing, and that's what I do like about the DanMachi story. It isn't just all focused on one character. Even though Belle is the main character of the story, there are other characters that do get spotlight as well. So I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Where do you think the story is going to go? Check out my other videos in the playlist to kind of see where some of my opinions are on the more heavy spoiler kind of content and non-spoiler as well, because I think the journey is just beginning. I think Belle's journey is just going to get more and more and more insane, but I think basing this sort of concept of that it's going to end after a certain period of time on an old interview that may or may not be taken slightly out of context now because of how it's sort of warped over time, I think it's just best to kind of look at the journey where we're at and think, okay, what is left roughly, and think of where that could still go, because I still think there's still quite a bit of that journey left, which is good because I really do like the series. As long as the author's happy, he's making good bangers, I'm happy. And I'd love to know your thoughts. So of course, if you like this video, hit the like, subscribe, and I'll see you beautiful nerds in the next video.